when you're working with a team sport, as an example, you go through this kind of approach which is global. We set up a system, and you have to do something that's going to probably reach 70% of those athletes. You're probably going to miss out on 30%, but you just get something in place. It's a good system of working, and you're going to be effective in 70% of cases, let's say. But definitely in recent times, and this is quite a buzz, is coming around to the kind of N=1 game and looking at individualisation. And I think there's something that's beyond being able to quantify, whether you're wearing technology, whether you're measuring force production, whether you're looking at measuring range of motion change, all those other data-driven decisions. I think when it comes down to it, actually that one-to-one and that truly understanding the athlete allows you to be a little bit more able to provide them with individualized planning, programming, food, nutrition advice, all those other bits and pieces. And I know working with some colleagues who work in sports where they can control that, that's what their aim is. And how you scale that then to the wider population is difficult, because maybe coaching resources, contact time, all those other bits and pieces. So, how have you seen people go about that challenge with the trying to, rather than giving out generalized advice, is to try and scale that to become much more individual in the focus?
You're really at the heart of the question here, is that every human being is deeply unique and deeply individual with a behavior set, an experience, a blueprint of pattern. And yet simultaneously principles are principles. Like, yeah, you may only need 7.5 and I might need 8.5 hours of sleep. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right? Like the small term. And for the average person, when we hit the generalization of principles, we cover the rocks, right? It's enough, because as our friend Franz Bosch says, there's more variation in waltzing than there is in sprinting, which means at low load, low speed, low stress, low strain, there's a lot more tolerance for variability in the system. As the system starts to get under higher scrutiny, higher forces, higher sort of repetition, higher volumes, we start to see that all best practices really closely approximate each other. One of the things that jumps in my head when you're speaking that is, who is the stakeholder here? And how have we empowered her to be able to control that? Well, it turns out the stakeholder is the athlete. And now ask the question, how much and how ready and how willing is that athlete to own that process themselves? Am I an external process where I'm trying to measure the monkey from outside? I don't speak the monkey's language. I don't know how the monkey feels. I don't know if the monkey is tired of bananas, right? But I have all these monitors on this monkey, when I can teach this person, this human, to own those things and be able to turn the knobs up and down. This works for me, this doesn't work for me. What we see is a fundamental failure of empowerment and teaching the central only stakeholder in that, how to feel, how to make decisions, how to critically evaluate what best practice is for him and her in the context of a bigger system. So that suddenly that person who's in the middle says, you know what, man, I've been eating this whey protein and that gives me diarrhea. Well, and then it turns out that, of course, that person is lactose intolerant. It doesn't handle that bulk whey processing side effect of cattle and dairy processing as a protein source. You put them on, and this is a true story, right? Among a really excellent hockey team, they get them on a vegetarian plant-based protein post-sport. Yes, is beef better? Yes, but is it difficult to eat a beef sandwich after a game? Yes. It's so we get it. Like, some of this is what is the best choice available to me in this moment? I'll make that choice. You switch this athlete onto something that doesn't look like whey anymore, and they absorb iron, and their diarrhea goes away, and their stomach and gas. That's that idea where an athlete has to be empowered, and you can't also just back the dump truck up and put it on the kid, right? We're seeing a generation of football, I mean like international football athletes suddenly who've grown up and are owning the process a little bit more. They're not passive I don't know why my Achilles ruptured. I just woke up one day and it was like that. These kids are starting to become sophisticated, starting to become empowered and educated, and are really part of the dyad of conversation. And guess what? That's the definition of expert clinicianship. It's a conversation between patient and provider, or athlete and coach. It's not this top-down patriarchal model, which is still how we're trying to process. But what we have is a generation of athletes who aren't ready, or who haven't been set up for success to own this whole process about, where should the soft tissue work be done to reduce session cost, or to downregulate, or to address something that feels stiff? Not in the weight room, not before we have the match, not on the pitch, right? This is to be done by the athlete before they go to bed, because that's what it means to be an athlete, right? Who's responsible for setting up the sleep? Well, it turns out it's the athlete, right? So you mean you might have to come in and teach someone this and say, you got to own this. And by the way, we can track it for a while until we get our hands on this. But that's, I think, the central idea is we need to do a better job through the strata, through the sort of the column of athletic development. It was saying, hey, this is what it means. You have to drink some water. Yes, when you finish the match, did you eat breakfast today? It's not, did you get this turmeric at, this 1.75 hours past? Like, I think we've really gone deep on misplaced precision. And the second component to your conversation is, how many athletes do you have? What is the specificity and resources that you can deliver this individualization on? Oh, you have, how many members are on a professional football team?
Well, let's say, looking about 27, let's say, okay. 28, 27.
So let's say you got 27, 28. Tour de France, maybe there's 12 guys or 8 guys, right? Okay, now I'm running a university and I have 600 kids in my program. So this suddenly changes the scope and dynamics of this. Oh, I'm in charge. I have one head coach, one strength and conditioning coach for an entire high school, right? So at some point, what you start to say is, well, what is it? Is it a coach I can control? And more importantly, how did I leave this athlete? There's a great conversation out of volleyball I really like. It's called improving the ball. Probably works in all sports. But if you touched it, you tried to put it in a better position, you tried to improve the ball. I really like this idea. And ultimately, if you're in a performance, you're a physio, you're a strength coach. By the way, I don't know what the differences between those two things are. And at some point, I'm going to run into an athlete who's like, I know all of this. Like, what's your job here, sir? Like, I run all of this myself. And I'm like, oh, okay, my work here is done. I can work 3 hours a week, not what we're currently seeing, which is playing whack-a-mole because we don't even have some ground rules or operations in order. So again, I need to know the scale at what you're working and the resources that you're managing. That will dictate a lot of the things that I'm trying to implement, and the conversations and the generality of principles. And 2, how prepared is the athlete to own her experience? So that when Simone Biles, who is a consummate athlete, says, I'm not ready to go, you're like, you're not ready to go. Let's not have you go. We have a deep enough roster that I trust you, right?